Доброго ранку, шановні колеги, колежанки.
Good morning, dear colleagues, friends, partners, representatives of the government, international organizations, and NGOs. I welcome you to this event where we will be discussing the state of implementation of the recommendations of the special report of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights and the observance of the rights of national minorities and indigenous peoples in the context of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation. I'd like to thank the Council of Europe for supporting this special report as well as the organization of this roundtable. Before we start the discussion, I'd like to ask you all to have a minute of silence in memory of all those who died as a result of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine.
Дякую.
Thank you.
Перед початком обговорення хотів
Before we start our discussion, I'd like to remind you of some technical issues. In case of an air raid alarm, we will ask you to please follow to the bomb shelter that we have on the lower floors of this building. Please mind you that there is simultaneous interpretation. You have headsets next to you. And now let's proceed directly to the main part of our event. And I'm giving the floor to the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, to present the recommendations of the state of implementation of the recommendation of the special report. Thank you. Good morning, dear colleagues. Dear Mr. Minister, representatives of the civil society, representatives of the Council of Europe, national minorities, I'm very happy to see you all today. And I suggest that we have a working meeting, a frank conversation to discuss this very important issue. We want to show that human rights have definitely not been stopped. Their protection because of the Russian aggression against my country. We're following carefully the situation to see that the recommendations that we develop are followed in terms of human rights, in particular in terms of protection of the rights of national minorities and communities. Where did it all start? In June of 2024, we publicly presented our special report covering the period starting with the start of the full-scale war from the 24th of February 2022 till the 31st of December 2023 on the national communities, minorities, and indigenous peoples in the occupation. Fight for survival. That was the basis of the special report. It was based on the results of our monitoring visits, analytical report of the department that we had set up at our institution. Then I presented that special report. And I especially focused on the fact that we had developed 75 recommendations for the public authorities of Ukraine. And I said publicly that sometime later we wanted to have a public discussion of the state of implementation of those recommendations. The recommendations were about the key areas: language, education, culture, participation in political life, countering discrimination, documentation, etc. To assess the state of implementation, we did not only use the official requests to the public authorities. We engaged in this process representatives of the national minorities and indigenous peoples. We had with them frank conversations because we believe that it is they who can give us an objective assessment about whether certain recommendations have been implemented, whether the protection of their rights has improved. We had profound interviews, I can tell you. We developed a separate document assessment, the state of implementation of the recommendations, which is the one we're going to present and publicly discuss today. I'd like to thank all the representatives of the national minorities and communities and indigenous peoples who have participated in this work. Separate thanks to the Council of Europe, as always, to the Council of Europe office in Ukraine that has helped us to develop this special report and this document on the state of implementation of the recommendations. So, the general assessment, as the situation is today, 45 recommendations have been implemented. That's 60%. 12 recommendations, 16%, are in the process of implementation. 18 recommendations, that's 24%, have not been implemented. Therefore, 76% of all the planned steps have been taken or are in the process of implementation, which is not a bad result, I can tell you frankly. However, whether we can believe that this is enough, no, I don't think so. And if we look at the areas in which those implementations that have not been implemented are, but let's start with those authorities who have performed the best and the best dynamics. Regional military administrations, 100% of our recommendations have been implemented. Representative Office of the President of Ukraine and the Crimean Republic, 100%. The Ministry for Foreign Affairs, 100%. The Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, 87.5%. We see positive dynamics in the work of the Ministry of Education, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and Regional Administration. Shows that even in the wartime, it is possible not only to implement our recommendations, but to be proactive without waiting sometimes for our recommendation. For example, the Ministry of Education has developed curricula with the languages of national minorities. The MFA engages representatives of national communities to international fora to show the multicultural nature of Ukraine. There is a process of permanent consultations with the representatives of national minorities, which allows the local administrations to take their opinions into account. Critically low level is what we see at the Ministry of the State Migration Service of Ukraine, only 8.3%, where most recommendations to provide documents to the Roma community have not been met. And that's a challenge for all of us, dear colleagues. The State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience has implemented only 50% of the recommendations it had received, although I was sure that that leading authority created with the Ukrainian government would show the best result. These examples, I believe, show that the institutional responsibility and readiness of certain public authorities is not the same, is not even. Where we have clear structure, the work continues. Well, of course, it was easier to implement the recommendations where there was already the legal framework for it. Language rights, for example, 100%. The right to use languages of national minorities in the areas of education, culture, official communication at the regional level. That's been done. The Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communications has supported translation of cultural materials in the languages of national minorities. And of all the ministries, the only minister who has joined us here today is the Minister of Culture and Strategic Communications, for which I want to especially thank him. The National Council of Ukraine for Radio and TV Broadcasting is helping development of broadcasting in the languages of national minorities on the regional level. We've paid attention to that, and thank you for having fulfilled that recommendation. The regional military administrations are supporting regional events in the languages of national minorities. The right to free assemblies, it has been implemented to 100%. That's done by the government by financing the targeted program Unity and Diversity, and the program was adopted back in 2024. Education, the recommendations have been met by 87.5%. That means that there are now classes at schools where certain subjects are taught in the languages of the national minorities. Teachers are trained. The Ministry of Education of Ukraine has made sure that the educational process is adapted to the needs of the national minorities and indigenous peoples. For example, a roadmap was adopted to create the possibilities to improve situation with the tuition in the languages of national minorities at the schools of Ukraine for the period between 2023 and 2027, which automatically has increased the level of education in the national language and the languages of national minorities. A council of representatives of the national minorities and indigenous people has been set up with the Ministry of Culture. Participation in civic life, 75%. In some regions, they systemically include representatives of the national minorities into the decision-making bodies. We've even seen that even advisors have been appointed to the heads of territorial communities representing national communities, minorities. Examples that demonstrate the best results, as I said, are MFA. We've seen that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has started actively engaging national minorities to international platforms. Directly, we cooperate with the civil associations or associations of national minorities. They even leave the country by using the letters that I sent to the ministry with support of the MFA. The Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine works to integrate culture and language diversion or in education, and in a number of regions we already have a common dialogue with the associations of national minorities. I cannot say it covers all the territory of Ukraine yet, but these are the best practices we have seen documented. We would very much like that during our today's discussion we can also think about how to disseminate those best practices over the territory of all of our country, with exception, unfortunately, of those territories that are temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation. The most dramatic problems: the right to get documents, identification papers. We have developed 13 recommendations, of which only one has been implemented, that's 7.7%. The responsible persons for their implementation were primarily the State Migration Service and the Ministry of Justice. Most recommendations were not met, were not implemented. Today we can think about why it has happened, but I believe that the failure to perform those recommendations is related to the absence of will to implement the recommendations that we have developed. The situation with documenting the Roma community is among the most critical ones. Separately, I wanted to focus on that. The rights of the Roma national minority community show that people do not have documents, and they don't have documents. They are completely isolated from any public life in Ukraine. And it's a problem that Ukraine has not been able to solve during all the years of its independence. And I believe that the authority that is directly responsible for it should be engaged as much as possible in the process of implementation of our recommendations. Primarily, that's the State Migration Service of Ukraine. The absence of a concept to create a register of persons who have no documents, identification papers, they have not developed the procedures for issuing temporarily IDs for the persons while they're while the process of providing documents continues. Sometimes this procedure takes years, sometimes months, but sometimes it's years if a person comes to Ukrainian courts with a request. And all that time, as I said, people cannot get even basic services like healthcare, educational, social services. We have even launched, together with the Council of Europe, a separate project, documentation of the Roman national community between 2023 and as situation is today. They have managed to give give passports to 159 citizens of Ukraine, 85 birth certificates, 23 persons with our help have turned to the Ukrainian courts. But the scale of the problem is huge. There are tens of thousands of people who cannot get documents. And here we have examples, like, for example, how Moldova or Georgia have moved there because they automatically considered all the people living in their territories as their own citizens. And that's how they resolved very quickly this problem. We, in our recommendations, we even suggested a more profound way. We suggested in our recommendations what should be done, what legal acts should be adopted. In fact, we have done the homework for the Ministry of Justice and the State Migration Service. Instead of implementing those recommendations, what we get is formal responses saying that this is impossible to do. Counter-discrimination. The recommendations have been implemented by 40%. The anti-discrimination legislation should be strengthened. The law enforcement authorities should have very clear tools to effectively investigate hate crimes, and the hate speech issues have to be resolved in a legislative way. We finally have to introduce an administrative liability for discrimination, and this request has been on the table for more than 10 years. We've brought up this issue, and this has been brought up by the European Commission, the European Union, during our accession negotiations. This is one of the key issues, and we're still thinking about whether we should do it and how to do that. I can tell you that as the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, we are responsible for two chapters in terms of Ukrainian accession. We participate with the negotiations and the negotiation with the European Commission, and this question is always brought up. I believe that the problem why these implementations are not met or partially met in the area of ethnic policy, that's 7 systemic problems. Institutional incapacity. Quite a lot of the executive authorities do not have the leading experts or units who would deal with this problem, and automatically that means we have a deficit of qualified professionals who are capable of developing changes to the legal acts and implement those changes. Second, instability and fragmented powers in the area of ethnic policy, which I believe is still a serious problem. Some of the powers are what the Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communications has. Partially is the State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Policies and Freedom of Speech, Freedom of Conscience. Other government authorities also have them, which makes it difficult to understand who should develop the public policy. In the situation when this responsibility is shared by different institutions, you understand it's much easier to say, it's not us, somebody else should do that. And that's how responsibility is just passed over. Bureaucratic restrictions, which in fact paralyze decision-making, any even technical instruction, it taken months or sometimes years to approve it, and we have documented this many times. Legislative barriers. Some of the recommendations have not been implemented because of the lack of necessary amendments in the legal framework. The absence of the procedures for monitoring and accountability, because there is a lack of clear indicators for effective performance and assessment. Well, and there is a situation where there is no accountability for implementation or for the failure to implement even the recommendations of the Ombudsman. So we've got together, we have discussed something, and even if nothing has been done, there is no accountability. I believe that there is no coordination for the public authorities in the area of ethnic policies, and I believe that this is the function of the State Service for Ethnic Policies and Freedom of Conscience, which should directly be responsible for that. And finally, the 7th problem is clear enough, and the 7th problem that we cannot affect. These are difficulties related to the aggression of the Russian Federation.
De facto, these circumstances created objective difficulties. We have destroyed infrastructure. We see dramatic change among the population, including ethnic groups that used to live on the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. At the moment, from my perspective, we need to pursue more comprehensive approach when it comes to the issues of national minorities. On the basis of the analysis conducted, I believe we should undertake the following steps that we are suggesting, namely providing for implementation of comprehensive recommendations. We need to prioritize the recommendations that need implementation. Second, that's strengthening managerial capacity, and I am appealing to the conscience of the representatives of the executive branch of power to urge them to focus on this issue because it's a part of our European integration process. Number one issue, one of the key problematic issues is going to be the protection of the rights of national minorities. And this could be the subject of manipulations of some of our neighbors. I'm not going to name them, but you know all of them. I am going to invite the ombudsman from the neighboring countries to come to Ukraine. We had the visit of ombudsman from Romania, and we worked on many issues. That was horizontal approach to ombudsman. Worked on that. Initially, it was a 2-day visit. A Romanian colleague came to Ukraine first, and we worked on the territory of Ukraine. Next day, we moved over to Romania, and there we talked to representatives of Ukrainian minority living there. As a result of that, we have 2 documents, one addressed to Ukrainian government and the second is addressed to Romanian government. This way we mitigated tension and resolved lots of different issues. This similar approach is suggested to Hungarian ombudsman, looking forward to his visit. Second, there's stable funding. We do understand that the priority remains the armed forces of Ukraine, and public budget is going to allocate funds to strengthen Ukrainian army first. But even if it is a symbolic suggestion of having some programs to support national minorities without respective funding or some funding would be a very good step to show that that's going to be a priority for the government after the war. Despite the progress achieved, and I do believe that there is progress, 76% of recommendations, implementations is a big success for all of us. We are on the right track, but at the same time we need to additionally work on that. And based on the results of today's discussion, I am going to send to the Prime Minister the results of the analysis of our recommendations implementation with a specification of those authorities who have been the most successful and professional in doing that, and stating those authorities that from my perspective intentionally, conscientiously hamper the process of implementation of new approach and practices to enforce the rights of the national minorities. Thanks a lot for this discussion. We are not keen on criticizing. What we want to do is just to move forward along with others, develop the best practices. And I do stress that from my perspective, Ukraine shows the best practice of protecting the rights of national minorities, national communities in Europe. But along with that, we still have some issues to resolve. Thanks a lot for the attention. I am looking forward to open, frank, professional dialogue of all stakeholders. Thanks a lot.
Щиро дякуємо, Дмитро Валерійовичу.
Thanks a lot, Dmitro, for fundamental overview of the state of implementation of recommendations of the special report. We do see a clear signal that each of the recommendations, each number is the destiny of our national minorities, and improving implementation and enforcement of their rights is requiring a systemic approach of all stakeholders, executive authorities, local governments, and international partners. And here let's move over to the dialogue with the international partners. And let me give the floor to Thorsten Afflerbach, head of the Division on Inclusion and Anti-Discrimination Programs Council of Europe. Mr. Afflerbach, the floor of yours. Please present the overview of the Council of Europe as to the assessment of implementation of the recommendations with respect to the rights of national minorities, as well as international cooperation to strengthen a mechanism to enforce human rights during the war. The floor is yours, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can I just have a sound check that you can hear me okay? Can I have a feedback? Is the microphone working?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. So, distinguished ombudsperson, Mr. Lubinets, Mr. Trochitsky, Mr. Shishikov, Mr. Kucherayavenko, representatives of national minorities. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Lubinets for the invitation to us to join the presentation of this important piece of work of the institution you are heading. In 2024, the first special report of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights on the observance of the rights of national minorities and indigenous peoples in the context of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine for the period of February 2022 to December 23 was presented. This report was finalized with the support of the joint project focused on anti-discrimination and rights of national minorities, which as Council of Europe, we implement jointly with the European Union partners. This report is very important because it's a prerogative of national equality bodies that, as set out in ECRI's General Policy Recommendation number 2 revised on equality bodies to combat racism and intolerance at national level. Equality bodies shall ensure continuous dialogue with groups exposed to discrimination and intolerance. They should involve these groups and their representative organizations in the activities and structures of the equality body, and they should ensure regular presence of the equality body within these communities to support trust building and the reporting of instances of discrimination and intolerance. Now, together with Ombudsperson Mr. Lubinets and his associates, we have come a long way in this respect, ensuring understanding of the role of an equality body and how to implement it in the national context. Furthermore, the work carried out jointly ensured a deeper understanding of the rights of national minorities enshrined in European standards, such as the Council of Europe's Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. The report emphasized the specifically serious situation of some minorities. For the territorial distribution in the front lines of the Russian aggression, for example, for the Crimean Tatars and other minorities from the east and south, the state of minorities in the occupied territories being a matter of very serious concern. Or Roma communities, which suffer from exacerbating existing discrimination and social gaps due to the crisis. Today's agenda includes a review of the implementation status of the recommendations outlined in the special report. The recommendations include a call for different institutions to strengthen legislation on hate speech, including online hate speech, and hate crime and to appropriately sanction them. They include recommendations to ensure cultural and language rights for all, and to better protect Roma communities and to ensure their access to basic rights and to identification papers. I would like to assure Mr. Lubinets and all our national partners of our continuous support. It is vital to ensure that reforms can improve the lives of minorities and protect their rights in line with European standards in a meaningful and tangible manner. I wish you some very fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Щиро дякуємо за вашу
Thank you very much indeed for your expert assessment and significant recommendations that you've outlined. That's very important for Ukraine, for our cooperation when it comes to anti-discrimination, inclusivity, to combat hate speech, hate crimes, and protect the rights of Roma, the national minority. These comments underscore the importance of cooperation of national authorities, international partners, and civil society organizations. Let's move over to the next part where we are going to focus on the implementation of the recommendation by state authorities and their approaches. We are going to hear out the specific accomplishments and major difficulties that the colleagues are facing to this end. Another technical scene, could you please stick to 5-6 minutes in your presentations? And the first to speak is the Minister of Culture and Strategic Communications of Ukraine, Mr. Tochitsky. Could you please tell us more about the work of the ministry to implement the recommendations provided? Thank you, Alexander. Good morning, dear colleagues, Mr. Ombudsman, members of the Parliament, experts, representatives of different national minorities that are our crucial partners to this end. Today we are discussing a strategic subject matter that's preserving identity of national minorities and indigenous people in the context of Russian aggression and occupation. It's not a secret to anybody in the 21st century that Russian Federation is waging the war of genocide. For centuries it has been resorting to the practice of imposing a Russian identity, if there is any, by promoting assimilation, exercises physical and ideological extinction of indigenous people and national minorities. The Ombudsman's report that we are discussing reflects everything that I've said before. The aggressive power is doing the same to Ukrainian identity and representatives of Ukrainian culture, whether that's on the territory of Russian Federation or on the occupied territories. As a result of the occupation of the most multi-ethnic regions of Ukraine in Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Crimea, representatives of national minorities and indigenous people were the primary target of the aggressive power due to their belonging to the Ukrainian national identity that showed its resistance in this war. Discrimination attitude is revealed in everyday life in combination with other violations that include attacks and assaults at the Ukrainian institutions. 1,700 of artifacts are under occupation. More than 200 of cultural institutions are partly or fully destroyed by the Russian Federation. Any cultural diversity is something that is ignored by the Russian side, and temporarily occupied territories serve as the springboard to further colonization of Ukrainian identity. Ukrainian government promoted diversity, cultural, religious, and historic. That's the duty of our government, and that's my direct duty as representative of the Ministry of Culture to preserve the culture and history and diversity of our national minorities. We have to remember, we have to do our best to fulfill the decisions of the Ukrainian parliament and implement the constitution of Ukraine adopted in 1996. Dear colleagues, Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communications undertake measures to implement the European Charter. That's the main document that is a framework document for us to show the European nature of Ukraine. European Charter for regional minority languages is our main document. Ukrainian Cultural Foundation is the main body to implement that. As of recent, the fund allocated 30 million hryvnia to implement 24 projects to meet cultural and national requirements of national minorities. We have a special category, the culture of national minorities within the framework of the European diversity, and regional cultures, that's a special category, as well as other programs that exist that should support this type of activity and show that we'll be able to prevail only when we'll be able to preserve identity of all peoples and unity in our fight. During the war, culture and cultural policy should be based on the understanding of the values of cultural diversity. It is enriching our cultural heritage. Ukrainian culture has been developing for centuries through interaction and integration, and it continues developing on the European values. That's the basis for Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian state. At the times of conflicts, that's especially important for the society to keep diversity, not the element of schism, but the cementing element to counter the enemy. And that's what is uniting us as a political nation. The society should know that when countering armed aggression, we have representatives of many national minorities and indigenous people as part of the armed forces. We support developing video materials and other media products to promote heroism at the front line. Volunteering is partisan movement and humanitarian mission. The ministry funds respective projects of Suspilne TV broadcast in Ukraine. Suspilne TV broadcast has a coordinating center broadcasting of national minorities that promotes the rights of national minorities and indigenous people. We have the programs in the languages of national minorities that are broadcast at TV channels, radio channels, YouTube channels, regional branches, etc. In particular, we have the projects in Romanian, Bulgarian, German, Hungarian, and Roma languages, Slovak and Hagauzi language. At the same time, Suspilne has programs in Ukrainian languages to promote the knowledge of national minorities and indigenous people, to promote diversity. We produced several video materials and documentary films about Roma servicemen. We have the video about chaplain that helps on the occupied territories, about the person that is serving in the armed forces, and a Roma woman that supports poor Ukrinform news agency that is operating within our ministry, supports different media products to show that national minorities is indispensable element of Ukrainian element. As to the recommendations provided Ombudsman and cultural heritage preservation, the ministry records all the damage irrespective of the value of the object. We do not differentiate. We believe that everything is our heritage, cultural heritage, and we need to do our best to preserve cultural heritage for the generations under national legislation.
We are trying to improve the mechanism for documenting the national heritage, the issue of preserving it and to giving it protected status to the representatives of the minorities, communities, is done through the legal framework. And there is the law on protection of cultural heritage and procedures for its implementation. At the same time, the experts of the minister are saying that at the moment, the procedures are even and fair towards all cultural groups. However, in the register, we will have a clear window where we will say which indigenous people or which national minority owns a certain entity or facility. In its work, the ministry works every day to tell our colleagues at the Fora on Cultural Unity, where we also work with the Polish chairmanship and Denmark, telling them that a certain artifact is a part of our heritage, belonging to a national minority or to indigenous people. The recommendations suggest that a virtual museum of history and culture of national minorities is to be set up. The ministry is ready to implement this idea. And the institution that will do that is going to be the National Museum of History of Ukraine, that has a large collection of historical artifacts representing national minorities and indigenous peoples. Some of those items could be a part of the new virtual museum. However, here we require partnership to cooperate with your colleagues. As the Ombudsman said, in the war realities, our financial possibilities are somewhat limited. However, we're working on that to create a national heritage or cultural heritage foundation. We will work for the benefit of all national minorities and indigenous peoples. We remain open for dialogue and cooperation with the national minorities, indigenous peoples, and NGOs working in this area. Once again, I'd like to call upon all of you to pay attention to the website of the Ukrainian Culture Foundation and to use the possibilities that the government provides. Thank you very much, Mr. Ombudsman, members of Parliament, colleagues. Have a good day, everybody. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for your speech. During that speech, we already received 2 recommendations that have not been implemented by the Ministry of Culture. Well, they have been almost implemented, in fact, and we want to thank you for your clear vector of actions, and as you yourself said, for this open dialogue that we have with you. Thank you. I'm giving the floor now to Mykola Kucheryavenko, First Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine. We will ask you to tell us about the possibilities and plans for the further implementation of the instruments of legal assistance to the representatives of national minorities and indigenous peoples, and as regards implementation of our recommendations. Thank you. Well, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that the recommendations were mostly about two problems. First one, the law of Ukraine on free legal aid, and amending the rules or to the acts of civil status and their updating procedures and so on. In that sense, the Ministry of Justice, I believe, has had a systemic approach to those recommendations, to those demands, I would even say, because if we're talking about the law of Ukraine on free legal aid, on the 30th of July 2024, it was adopted at the meeting of the government. On the 5th of December, it was formally approved. As regards those two recommendations, I'd like to focus on the following. I believe that, or perhaps we should pay more attention not so much to the implementation of those recommendations, but rather to understand the systemic nature of those recommendations. Because, for example, implementation of the recommendations as regards adoption of the law on free legal aid suggested a series of requirements without which it would not function. And that's, for example, amending the family code, amending the civil code, amending the legislation that regulates a certain registration instruments. And in that sense, the Ministry of Justice has initiated and updated or amended the law of Ukraine on public registration of civil acts, because amending the procedures and the rules about which I have already said would suggest exactly that. Next, I would also like to pay attention to the following, based on the criteria of a systemic nature. Implementation of those recommendations suggests some kind of guidelines for the future. And this is what we're trying to do. Well, for example, we should not remind everyone about the 18th and 19th of December 2024, when all the registers weren't down. You all remember that because almost everyone felt how inconvenient it was, and clearly it wouldn't have been possible to work in a single area that I mentioned without getting those registers back. Yes, it took us a month. You're right, it was not only the Ministry of Justice, but the Committee for Special Communications, that's the cyber police, and so on. And here I'd like to emphasize that it was exactly the registers that were to be updated. We in fact managed to get them back by the 1st of December. First, the registers, the notary registers went back to life with a week later, but in general, all the process took us by the 20th of January 2025. It was a real victory for us. Why I remember that? Because those recommendations that you focused on, they could not work without that systemic support. Two more accents I'd like to make related to how the powers of the Ministry of Justice work. That's the simplified system for registration of birth, marriage, death, that today have to be performed by the consulate services and the embassies, and which automatically are then transferred to the registers managed by the Ministry of Justice. So to do that, you didn't have any physical presence of the person in Ukraine. All this can be done outside of Ukraine. And this is related to two more trends which the Ministry of Justice is now working on. This is e-notary work, and we're trying, at least we can promise you that by the end of this year, we will launch that project. And absolutely digitized notary services, which I believe would simplify a whole range of activities related to the implementation of the systemic nature of such recommendations. I think I have used my minutes as suggested by the chairman. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kucherevenko, for your analysis of your work, for the developments we see in the work of the Ministry of Justice, and about the systemic nature of that work you've mentioned. Let's proceed. The issue of protection of the rights of the persons who belong to the national minorities, in particular in the occupied territories. This is one of the important aspects of our joint work. That's why I'd like to give the floor now to Denis Chistyakov, Deputy Permanent Representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. Perhaps you can speak about the practical aspects of how monitoring is organized in the temporarily occupied territories, in particular as regards the rights of the indigenous peoples in the territory of the Republic of Crimea. Thank you, Mr. Lubinets, dear members of Parliament, the representatives of national minorities and ethnic peoples. As regards the report, our representative office implemented it by 100%, and here I'd like to share our experience with you as to how it can be used. Among the areas that the representative office does is monitoring of human rights, and the representative office not only monitors the situation but tries to use the information as much as possible to share it with the public authorities and international partners. Every week we send the results of our monitoring to the public authorities and to diplomatic offices in Ukraine. Besides, this year we've organized a meeting with representatives of the NGOs of the national minorities. We have agreed that those monitoring information would also be shared with those NGOs so they can use it while talking to international partners about the crimes committed by the Russian Federation. In its work, the representative office cooperates with different representative bodies, including Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people. Together with Mejlis, we're working to bring back the work on the National Commission on the Crimean Tatar language, which was suspended because of the restructuring of the Ministry of Integration, and the draft has already been proposed. Together with Mejlis and the Office of the President, we started a memorial to the victims of the genocide of the Crimean Tatar people, which allowed us to draw attention to the situation in the temporarily occupied Crimea. The representative office works with other indigenous peoples. By the end of this month, we're going to have meetings with Karaims and Krimchaks, where we plan to engage young people representing those peoples, which can give a new impetus to their development. Together with the State Migration Service, we're going to have a discussion with the Karaims and Krimchaks on how to preserve documentary cultural heritage of those peoples that is kept in its archives, that can be important for Ukraine to document the crimes of the Russian Federation during all this period of the policy of colonization. The representative office tries to use different international platforms to draw attention to the situation in the temporarily occupied Crimea. This year, while having the International Ukrainian Recovery Conference in Rome, the representative office plans to have a number of events, including with participation of the former Italians who lived in the Republic of Crimea, who can testify about other crimes of the Russian Federation. At the same time, we want to use that platform to draw everyone's attention to the crimes committed in the territory of Crimea, especially after the start of the full-scale invasion. Among the main ones are the failure to provide health care to our prisoners and the detention facilities, which has led to 2 deaths of the representatives of the indigenous peoples, the ban to have religious ceremonies in the detention facilities as a result, and if the prisoners defy that, they get additional sentences and sanctions. Besides, they are usually kept at the territories between 2,000 and 7,000 kilometers from the place where those people live. In 2025, the Russian Federation has allocated a huge budget for propaganda among the young people, especially in the territory of Crimea, with engagement of our children from the so-called newly occupied territories, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. And that's very important that we should confront that together with our international partners. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chistikov. The recommendations, the Permanent Representative Office has implemented all of our recommendations 100%. Thank you for that and for implementing the recommendations that improve the life and the rights of the national minorities and the indigenous peoples. Next, we proceed to the National Police of Ukraine. I'm giving the floor to the Deputy Head of the National Police of Ukraine, Head of Criminal Police, Andriy Nebitov. We would like to hear from the National Police about your implementation of the recommendations. Good morning, everybody. Dear Mr. Ombudsman, dear representatives, the participants of this meeting. First of all, I want to say that the National Police of Ukraine is grateful to you for a possibility to participate in this discussion. The issue of ensuring the rights and freedoms of the people, including the representatives of national minorities and indigenous peoples, among the in the view of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation, is very important for the national police, and we keep monitoring the situation. On behalf of the top managers of the national police, I want to assure you that implementation of your recommendations is believed to be one of the most important areas in the work of the law enforcement authorities during the war. To implement your recommendations, in particular as regards documenting hate crimes or hate speech, and to make sure that all such crimes are documented, including by creating a comprehensive system to gather disaggregated data. We have initiated a study and the methodological recommendations. A letter has been sent to the National Academy of Internal Affairs, and it has already been included into the plan of research work for 2025. I'm sure that in 2025 we will get quite profound methodological recommendations for all the national police officers. At the same time, we also gather information as regards violations related to discrimination and intolerance. This data is regularly published within our information and communication system of the National Police. The main investigation department has analyzed the situation of pre-trial investigations, of criminal proceedings with the elements of discrimination. We studied all the proceedings. We provided proper guidelines to the regional offices so that they can control and concentrate on the monitoring of pretrial investigations in such cases. We see a positive trend as regards criminal offenses under Article 161, and these are violations of equal rights of the people depending on their racial or national origins. religious beliefs or disabilities and on other grounds. During 2024, we have registered 86 of such crimes, which is 36.8% lower compared to 2023, where such facts were 136. The indictments in 2024 have been sent to the court, 26 indictments, and in 2023, 23 of such crimes have been investigated. In 2024, the investigators of the National Police of Ukraine took a course on combating hate speech organized by the Council of Europe and participated in an international conference supported by Freedom House on monitoring hate crimes.
We are actively developing partnership relations with representatives of national minorities and civil society organizations. We had several roundtables, including the one held on February 28. That's cooperation on the issues of anti-discrimination, where I discussed how police can create a safe environment for national minorities. We have established cooperation with representatives of Muslim communities. With the support of Ukrainian Center of Dialogue and Communication, we had a meeting with the ambassador of Egypt to Ukraine to implement the order, to implement the strategy regarding Roma minority until 2030. We developed the preventive measures plan for 2025. In every region, we have working groups that monitor online and offline the instances of intolerance and discrimination. In the places of compact settlement of Roma, we have patrolling officers and police officers, as well as juvenile prevention officers, to prevent crimes and respond to the instances appropriately. Special attention is paid to Roma children to prevent deviative behavior and to prevent substance abuse. We organize the cooperation with authorities, the offices for the rights of children and territorial communities. Apart from that, police are subject to online courses. That's the web portal of National Police, where materials on human rights, Convention on Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms, Mendes principles, and other documents that they study. National Police of Ukraine continue working to implement recommendations of the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights. We understand the importance of cooperation with local communities. We are open to constructive criticism and ready to introduce and implement new approaches to create a safe, non-discriminatory environment for all citizens of Ukraine, irrespective of nationality, religion, and origin. Thanks for attention. Looking forward to further cooperation. Thank you, Andrei, for your presentation. Thanks a lot for the cooperation we've had, and thanks a lot for implementing 2 out of 3 recommendations. We had a clear signal to make sure that all of the recommendations are implemented. Then the floor is given to the member of the National Commission on TV and Radio Broadcasting, Director of the Department of Control. Dear colleagues, dear members of the Round Table, let me just state that the National Council pays a lot of attention to make sure that all citizens of Ukraine have free access to information. And our strategic task is to have the information, the space that is based on the principles of equality, tolerance, and inclusivity. Let me just move over to recommendations. The first recommendation was to provide information accessible information space for national minorities living in Transcarpathian region. Among the registered media outlets in Transcarpathian region, there are 10 outlets that meet the requirements and broadcast in the language of national minorities, 2 linear, 5 printed media outlets, that's 3 newspapers, 2 magazines, online media outlet, and we have a satellite radio broadcaster. All these media outlets have the programs that are broadcast mainly in Hungarian, because the Hungarian minority has the largest share in Transcarpathian region. But we also have programs in Romanian, Slovak, and Romanian language, Romani language. Special attention was paid to Beregev district. We have radio broadcasting, and there is a newspaper that is published in Beregev district. As to the coordination center, Mr. Tochitsky did mention that coordination center is tasked with to prepare, implement, disseminate content on national minorities and indigenous people of Ukraine. In Transcarpathian region, we have the branch of public service broadcaster operating. The support of national minorities is one of the strategic areas in the work of the National Council for the period of 2024-2026. And the second recommendation of Ombudsman Office was to develop a criteria of the hate language, hate crimes, and hate speech. That's Article 36 of the law on media that forbid disseminating this type of content with the elements of hate speech. 2 years ago, National Council introduced the program Competent Media Outlets, Tolerant Society. Within the framework of this program, we had dozens of meetings with representatives of different minorities, including representatives of Roma, Jewish, Crimean, Tatar, Muslim communities, to get first-hand information from them as to stereotypes, hate speech, and language of discrimination, so that the language and programs and messages about national minority are shaped with their assistance. Jointly with them and self-governing authorities, we have been developing respective criteria. Self-governing authorities have been set up, but they have not developed language codes that would include these criteria. So we started this work a little bit earlier to have a respective tool to respond to complaints and reports of national communities that could be exposed to hate speech, discriminatory rhetoric in our media space. We continue this work. We have developed lots of different materials, but we still have to work with the Hungarian community and Romanian community. We have already done this with Roma community. These two communities are still ahead of us. National Council keeps working to make sure that our information space contributes to strengthening unity of Ukrainian society. Let me thank Mr. Lubinets and his team for cooperation, for very constructive work that we've been enjoying with respect to enforcement of human rights and supporting and enforcing the rights of national minorities and unrestricted access of national minorities for all nations and ethnic groups of Ukraine. Thank you.
Дякуємо за ваш виступ.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for outlining specific steps to implement the recommendations provided, and thanks a lot for the cooperation we've enjoyed so far. Let me move over to the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, and the floor is given to Inna Gildarova, Director of the School Education of the Ministry of Education and Science. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak at this round table. Let me thank you for your assessment of the ministry as to implementation of the recommendations to promote and enforce the rights of national minorities and indigenous people. Ukraine is a multi-language, multi-ethnic country that guarantees political, economic, social, and cultural rights and freedoms, and it takes measures to ensure peace, understanding in our society, to promote the development of all citizens of Ukraine. We support national identity and provide for educational rights of all national minorities and communities. In 2019, the Constitution of Ukraine was amended as to strategic course to join the EU, NATO. European Atlantic integration has become part of external and internal policy of Ukraine. To continue this course, we have to resolve the issue of national minorities, to study in the national language in educational institutions of Ukraine. Ukraine, developing respective legislation, showed that it abides by the European standards when the protection of rights of national minorities and indigenous people is an indispensable element of political certainty. Ministry of Education and Science provides proper conditions in educational institutions to implement and protect the rights of national minorities communities of Ukraine, to preserve language and cultural identity of communities, and acquire high-quality education. In the course of last years, under martial law of Ukraine, we have undertaken important steps that show achievements. We resolved the issue of 100% tuition of all school subjects. It is relative to the time allocated. In 2023, we amended some laws of Ukraine to take into account expert assessment of the Council of Europe and its authorities as to the rights of national minorities and communities in some areas, and thus we amended the law on education on functioning Ukrainian language as the state language, on full secondary education as to the use of the language of national minorities that belong to the languages of the EU in education process. The amendments provided that the groups with the tuition in the languages of national minorities, that they are official EU languages, the right to use the language of the national minority is used along with the state language. It is guaranteed. We organize contests on the in different languages to figure out the level of mastering the languages of national minorities and foreign languages. In March, February 2024, Ministry of Education, jointly with the National Center, the Small Academy of Science, conducted the fourth final stage of the contest on the languages and literature of Hungarian, Romanian, Slovak, and Bulgarian languages, as well as Hebrew, modern Greek, and Polish languages. In 2024, for the first time, we had the national contest on the Slovak language. In 2024-2025, Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, jointly with the National Center of Small Academy of Science, introduced the contest in Czech, Crimean, Tatar languages and literature for the high school students. But the letter of the Ministry of Science of Ukraine provided explanation as to amendments to Article 7 of the Law of Ukraine on education that guarantees the right in the schools where there are forms where tuition is the national minority languages along with the state languages. So the language of the national minority and the symbols of the national minorities can be used in educational institutions if there are some forms where the tuition is conducted in the languages of the national minorities that are official of EU languages. That's also typical for the clubs and extra curricular activities, and it can also be used on the websites. As a result of negotiations with the Hungarian representatives, the instructions on teaching subjects in secondary educations in 2024-2025 identified that business language, if that school where there are forms with national minorities, could be done in 2 languages along with Ukrainian. It could be the language of the national minority if it is the official EU language. Another step is the order of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine that approved the roadmap to improve conditions of tuition in the languages of the national minorities communities in secondary schools for 2023-2027. In March 2024, with the support of the Council of Europe, we had a round table where we presented the roadmap. And as of today, we can say that this document governs some of the and settles some of the issues that cropped up before, and we amended legislation. We are in the process of ongoing consultations with communities and civil society organizations of national minorities communities. We take into account the suggestions of organizations of national minorities in teaching. We organize the language contests that I mentioned before. In 2023-2024, we translated a national multi-subject test that's mathematics, physics, biology, and geography into the national minority languages. We improved qualification of the teachers, introduced the concept of multi-language education. That's something that Ministry of Education has been working on jointly with the Academy of Pedagogical Science and the Council of Europe in Ukraine. We organize monitoring visits of the EU Commission, Council of Europe to Chernihiv, capacity and regions, and support the councils of national minorities at the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine. Let me underscore again that the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine is working in systemic manner to abide by legislation and guarantee the right to tuition in the national language to national minorities or learning the language of national minorities. Thank you for attention. We don't have the sound. Unfortunately, I don't have the sound. No input, sorry. Sorry, no input. We don't have the sound. Unfortunately, we cannot hear. Unfortunately, we cannot hear. Good morning. State Migration Service of Ukraine is issuing ID documents. We keep looking into the issues of Roma community that they have with documenting and doing our best to introduce amendments in our work. As to the recommendations, the ones that we've implemented, we developed the amendments to the procedure of getting passports informing in the language of the national minority. If the person is illiterate, then the person can point this out
показань родичів або іншої близької особи.
by testimonies of relatives.
Ідентифікація особи також вже внесені відповідні зміни до
As to identification of the person, we introduced legislative amendments respectively. We simplified the procedure of identification. We allowed not to submit original documents. We verify all of this on our own using the database. We expanded the number of persons that could testify to ID person, and the number was limited to 1. Apart from that, we introduced the procedure of remote identification. If, for instance, parents are staying on the temporarily occupied territory and the child is geographically located in Kyiv, then we can use video conference for the parents to testify that that's their child, and thus the child is issued the passport of the citizens of Ukraine. As to the recommendations that we have not implemented, since there are many there, would you like me to go through them one by one, or shall I speak in general? You provided information on each of the recommendations.
We have provided information about every recommendation and our explanations about why we cannot implement those recommendations or why they should be transferred to another authority. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the chairman.
Переписці офіційними листами не погоджуємося щодо можливості виконання, або як було назначено раніше, не працює. Дякую.
Thank you.
Як я казав щодо
Well, as I said, as regards, we have repeatedly talked about cooperation between various public authorities and how to develop clear step-by-step cooperation procedures. We would like to hear from you about the general situation, because there are very many explanations provided by the State Migration Service in terms of failing to implement our recommendations, are either that you cannot implement them because of the absence of legislative regulations and of the lack of desire to change anything. Let me simplify your work in order not to waste time today. Basically, I don't care what format you will choose. Either you will talk about every recommendation or give us general information. But I frankly believe that if the recommendations have been developed by my people, including with the participation of the experts, if you see that some recommendations, you cannot implement them, don't, and you should not tell us that it should be done by somebody else, but rather show us another path that will lead to finding a solution. But in fact, what we don't see is any desire to regulate the situation with providing documents to the persons who do not have passports of Ukrainian citizens or other legal grounds to stay in the territory of Ukraine. And that's not only about the Roma, but people, citizens of foreign countries staying in Ukraine, including citizens of the countries that have been considered citizens of the aggressor country or were citizens of the countries that support the aggression. But we have situations where even the Russian citizens were on legal grounds in Ukraine, and there are situations where they would sign official contracts. They would fight in the armed forces of Ukraine, and after that, they cannot get a procedure, clear procedure that they would understand as to how sometime in the future they can get a passport of Ukrainian citizen. That's the main problem as regards the Roma. You know that this is the problem that we've seen since the beginning of our independence. We, as the Parliamentary Commissioner's Office, we have this initiative to engage the Council of Europe to start the process of passportization. We go there and we engage you. And you know what the problem is? The problem is that that's not our mandate. And we want to see the authority that is responsible for them also takes the initiative rather than the parliamentary control authority. And that's the main problem in our communication with you, because your position is always, that's not ours, that's for the Ministry of Justice, that's for other authorities, we're not responsible for them. Create a separate register for the persons who don't have documents. You shouldn't do that. Any additional gaps, you should not regulate that. You say you should not about everything. But as a fact, tens of thousands of people living in Ukraine have no documents. You know, we run around this vicious circle. The parents don't have documents. They give a birth to a child. They cannot get documents for their children. And it has been happening for dozens of years like that. And we keep bringing up this problem. We have some new initiatives. Just read our recommendations. We even wrote to you what legal acts we believe should be drafted by you and proposed to the government. You're not even doing that. You're just saying, you shouldn't do that. All right, you should not do that. What should we do that? What should be done for the State Migration Service? Together with the other authorities, including ourselves, so in 5 or 10 years, the problem of people, physical persons who are staying in Ukraine without passports of the Ukrainian citizens, would not be there anymore. What should be done? That's the main problem that we're trying to resolve. But unfortunately, we don't see any desire to participate in that problem on your part. Well, our territorial bodies working at the local level always cooperate with the NGOs, with the social services, with the institutions for children with a special status. We always identify such persons without the documents, and we document them. According to our statistics, we document about 6,000 persons a year of the persons of this category. For example, we had a pilot project together with you in 2003, where the Ministry of Justice, NGOs, and the State Migration Service have developed a survey, a questionnaire for this category of persons, and the NGOs would identify persons without the documents, would share this information with us. We would check whether there were grounds to issue documents, and then we would go there, or those persons would come to us to get the documents. What did that pilot project show? In the territory of Transcarpathia, 302 persons were identified that had no documents. As a result of our work, basically, 30 persons who did not get any documents, 133 persons did get documents, and the others did not come to the State Migration Service to receive their passports, although they had all the grounds. That means that these persons also do not want to get their documents. They would only come to us when they want to have something. In Odessa region, our practice has shown that children usually graduate from those special facilities without any documents, and we're working with them to make sure that they would provide some documents, that they would get information to the children, that they would let them go, and they would come to get their passports on time and not when they're 25 years old. As regards creating a register of the persons who have no documents. At the moment, the State Migration Service manages the National Demographic Register, where we have information of those persons who ask for documents, including the ones who have not been identified. We have the identification procedure, and then we issue the documents. Creating a separate register of such persons is useless, because that would mean that there should be a special law law enacted, special funds should be allocated for this register, and it's not very clear what kind of information will be there, as they will not be identified. And the result of our work should come to issuing documents. As regards issuing temporary documents, practice has shown that such documents would not be accepted by a single authority to provide any service. Even if we issue such a document for the period while these persons are about to get their documents, it will not identify those persons, so no authority will accept those documents. We have some practice with the Ministry of Social Policy when the internally displaced persons, to get their status, would go to the social security agencies, but they didn't have any identification papers. We worked on that issue, and we proposed that they should come to us. They should submit a declaration saying that they had lost their documents, and we would get certificates to those persons so they could get the proper status. The Minister of Social Policy eventually decided that they only want to see a certificate that would be issued to those persons who have been identified. They do not want to give the status to the persons and then pay the money to the persons who have not been identified. Therefore, there is a resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers with the format of the certificates that we give to the persons who come to us asking for documents that they can submit to the social security authorities to get a proper status. However, it is only issued to the persons whose data can be found in the register. As regards your other recommendations to set up working groups or interagency cooperation, we already have working groups, which we have informed you about. That's mostly about finding solutions for problems and how to initiate legislative changes. That's primarily what the working groups under the State Service for Ethnic Policies should be doing, and they already have that working group. Yes, there is a representative, the first deputy. Well, I'm asking about whether there are representatives of the national communities, including the Roma. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you. But this is done without. Sorry, we cannot hear the chairman. You know, I'm talking about you as the State Migration Service. For years, you have not resolved the problems of the representatives of those nationalities who could not get citizenship for decades. The initiatives coming from the Council and the Assembly of National Minorities, we would give you for free our lawyers that the Migration Service cooperates with in a number of regions. Would you be ready for this type of cooperation? I'm sorry, just one comment. We will have a question and answer session at the end in order to take your time. Well, it's just that the representatives of some authorities, like the representative of the Ministry of Justice, is already gone, while everyone is still here. I decided to ask my question. Right, thank you. Thank you for your proposal. However, we have competent lawyers who can draft the amendments, who can do that, if need be. Sorry, we cannot hear when the microphone is not used. For 4 years, nothing has been done. In order to answer this question, I should understand what proposal you're talking about. First, let's listen to the answers. In order to answer your question, I need to understand what problems you see, why a law should be drafted, the law to draft what other law. We need to understand the problem in order to properly answer your question. And we are always ready. sorry, there is no sound.
Без питань.
Дивіться, я додам. От саме
Look, let me add something. Why one of our recommendations was to set up a working group with participation of the civil society to develop a concept, at least a concept, to identify the processes, how representatives of vulnerable groups, including Roma, can be given the identification documents. What you are saying, we will not perform this recommendation because there is already some other working group that has been set up with the State Service of Ethnic Policies, but they're not discussing some specific issues and specific problems as regards passportization and how documents can be issued. That's why you've heard it today. When that working group was set up, with this, if it was with the State Migration Service, the only question would be discussed there is how to resolve very specific problems for foreign people, people without citizenship, who physically are staying in the territory of Ukraine, but who have no documents at all. And such cases are very many. So usually we get a response saying it's not always yes. Very often your people would get engaged, but quite often we see that where we think there are all official grounds to issue a passport of a citizen of Ukraine to an applicant, and what we receive from you is just kind of a form of response saying, no, the current legislation cannot provide that, period. That's why we developed our recommendation. That's number one. I can list, I can read every recommendation. And in fact, they were drafted by our people based on those applications or applications made by Ukrainian citizens or foreign citizens that they can not get in touch to the State Migration Service. We've generalized it. We had a systemic approach and we drafted those recommendations. That's it. The next recommendation that you do not want to initiate either is to develop and submit to the Cabinet of Ministers amendments to paragraph 26, how to provide documents to the persons without citizenship. And you're also saying this is not in the law. We're saying, yes, it is not in the law. So draft it, and it should be there. And that's for every recommendation. I can, read each of them. So together with here, we can, share our expert opinions. We have all of them, but our expert opinion, as regards our recommendations, is backed on the applications I have received and the problems we see and how to engage the experts and how to engage representatives of the national minorities. And I don't want to use this word, but sometimes they, combat representatives of the State Migration Service and the Ukrainian courts for years, even for decades. I have a case of a foreign national who for 20 years has been living in Ukraine with proper legal grounds. His wife is a citizen of Ukraine. They have 3 children who are citizens of Ukraine. After 20 years, he has not been able to receive Ukrainian citizenship. Why? Because the State Migration Service turns him down. Why? Because the State Migration Service thinks that he has no confirmation of the fact that he has left citizenship of his country. And he says, how can I confirm this? Because nobody ever in any embassy of any foreign country would put a stamp, official stamp on a document to confirm that I have left my citizenship. What should I do more in Ukraine? I'm living here. I have my family here. I pay my taxes here. And not a single foreign country would give me that formal stamp in my documents. And this is the barrier on the basis of which you keep rejecting very many people, representatives of other countries who have shown with their acts that they are staying here in Ukraine and that they deserve to be citizens of Ukraine. That's just a formal approach. And we're saying, okay, you cannot do that? Fine. Let's do it together. Let's draft it. Let's develop that. So you could do that. But you should do that. So you eventually would not have any formal grounds to reject foreign nationals. And you're saying, no, we cannot do that. We will not implement this recommendation. And you inform me thereof officially.
Можливо, ви кажете зараз про
Perhaps you are now talking about nationals of foreign countries, right?
які набули громадянство і не можуть виконати
Who
зобов'язання.
have acquired citizenship and who cannot perform their commitment. But that's more about the citizens of the Russian
Але якщо вони
Federation.
служать, то на сьогоднішній
If
день
they are serving in the army, we have now amended to the law on citizenship, and we allow this category of people to provide their declarations. So now they acquire citizenship and they're documented with papers. This problem has been resolved.
Кроки з вашого боку.
Steps on your part as regards implementation of those recommendations. That's you believe that you have formally given me an answer as the parliamentary commissioner saying that we will not implement your recommendations, and you put a period there. Well, today that's our position, and we have written to you why we cannot do that and why we believe that some other authorities should do that. Again, I believe it's a formal approach rather than a desire to resolve global problems that we have in the country. I said that it was not accidental when I said this is not a period for me. As a result of this discussion, after I heard your official position, can I treat it as a formal position, right? Official position. I will initiate next steps and keep bringing up this issue via the government directly, and I will do everything so that this issue would change in Ukraine. Unfortunately, your formal approach, unfortunately, leaves very many formal rejections and gives us very many situations, and that there should be other possibilities to stimulate, let me put it like that, the state migration service by the people who cannot get official documents. And therefore, because of this position of yours, we're running around this circle for more than 30 years. We still have people who were physically born in Ukraine, but who had never received passports of Ukrainian citizens because of a formal approach. Thank you.
Пані Земфіра,
Так,
вам
дякую.
Zemfira, the floor is yours. Let me just add a few words that
також включено
documenting of Roma communities covered by the action plan regarding national minorities that is part of roadmap under section 23. This issue is subject to ongoing monitoring of international organizations. European Commission is paid attention to during screening. So the issue of documenting Roma communities high on the agenda. We know that the issue of the national minorities is having a big impact when it comes to the accession process to the EU by Ukraine, and protection of the rights of national minorities, including Roma, is also a very important element that European Commission is going to look at. So my request is do pay attention to this issue and give it a thought how we can see progress there and document people. We have dozens of thousands of people that don't have documents, and it's not because they are reluctant to do that. Maria, you were with us when we were making visits to Roma settlements, where we were listening to the personal stories of people, why in the course of 20-25 years they cannot get documents. I invite you to join us on these visits there, where mediator and Roma representatives are trying to make sure that people have documents for you to understand the issue better. We are aware of the issue, and we have our representatives working on the ground. They work with people, they provide consultations. So I cannot say that we are not handling this issue. We do. We officially cannot have any statistics regarding these people. The law does not allow for collecting statistics on ethnic ground, but we collect this information for our understanding to have better idea as how we are abiding by the requirements. We always pay attention to this. We don't get the sound. Sorry. There are mechanisms to document people, and if our representative, along with other local authorities, goes to settlements, they provide consultations first. They don't have computers, they don't have anything, so the first is consultations that we provide. If the person has the documents, then this consultation is more detailed as to how to get the documents issued. So the person in question is invited to territorial office to explain the procedure. So because the respective documents should be submitted, the pictures and fingerprints, all of this is done on the territory of our branch. We have mobile stations, and we introduce amendments to legislation so that it is mobile posts could work and do this. That's what we are working on. We'll have time to discuss that. We are slightly behind the schedule. It's not only about Roma. We have people with disabilities. But these mobile stations were procured to service not only Roma community, but also the persons with disabilities to reach them out. So that's why we procured them to be able to issue documents to this category of people as well. So the question was about issuing passports to Roma community and cooperation of State Migration Service and representatives of Roma community on the ground. Let's move over to the next part of our discussion, and we have a representative of DE, State Service of Ukraine for Ethnic Affairs and Freedom of Conscience. The floor is yours, dear Victor. Thank you, dear colleagues. Let me thank Ombudsman, Council of Europe Office, and other institutions that closely cooperate with us. I am surprised with 10 recommendations. It seems to me that we have completed a lot more, and as you confirmed, the recommendations were given to the Ministry of the Community Development, and before that it was the Ministry of Integration Temporarily Occupied Territories, and there were 2 recommendations that were not fulfilled. As to hotline and representatives, we conducted the analysis. We informed you in 2024 that we have the phone line, and we are consulting with them as to the violation of human rights, cultural, religious rights of national minorities and indigenous people, and as to the policies to this end. If it comes to specific complaints of the persons, it is the competence of a specific person. We reform law enforcement agencies, our Ombudsman Office. As to violations, we don't see any need in having a dedicated hotline, and we told you about that because it's just 2 or 3 reports per year that we receive. That's for the moment. Maybe we could see more if the hotline is established. As to the development of the measures to implement Roma strategy, in 2023 it wasn't relevant. As we told you, we have action plan to implement the strategy for the period of 2024-2025. On our website, we have the report on implementation of these measures. In 2024, we are going to have interagency commission meeting where we are going to report on our work, and this year respectively will develop the action plan for the upcoming years 2026, 27 and 28 as it was planned. As to the approval of the state program of preserving and developing of the unique languages, that's Greek and Berezovia, the program Unity in Adversity has a strategy of endangered languages, that's Roma and Romanian, and we are working with the community of Greeks, and with the support of the Council of Europe, we have the working group that is tasked with doing that, and we do hope that this year the strategy is going to be developed. Thank you. That was in brief. Another thing I would like to add, that's an important issue of interaction. We do understand that our service is small. We don't have regional offices, but we raise this issue when it comes to implementation of the program of the national minority rights until 2027. We stress the importance of regional hubs. We cooperate with military administrations and respective departments there that deal with these issues to have it. As to cooperation with other ministries, so we can say that it's pretty effective. This year we are going to have German-Ukrainian Commission on Cooperation regarding the persons of German origin, so thus we have restarted the process. We are doing that with Slovak and Romanian. That's in the pipeline. Today, Mr. Losovsky is going to present a report report on our work. That's engineer. That's 24th, 23, 25 report. And well, he is going to talk there about our accomplishments there. Thank you.
Хотів перепросити, буду їхати на наступну зустріч. Ми заслухали представників
I must be going. We had representatives of the state authorities and central level. So we have oblast military administrations in the next session. So they implemented recommendations by 100%. What was the main idea of this event, at least for me? Let me quote Ministry of Culture and Information Policy. There were two recommendations that we recorded as the ones that were not fulfilled. And the minister is saying one recommendation is to create the register of cultural heritage of representatives of national minorities. He is saying, so there is a register, and we have to do just a separate category to mark this particular object as belonging to one of the national minorities. And I mark it as a recommendation is fulfilled. The same recommendation to create a virtual museum. So the museum is being implemented, and I know that recommendation is implemented. When everybody was talking, I mean representatives of executive authorities, I made notes regarding the recommendations that have not been fulfilled or are still pending, just to note whether there is any desire. I like the national police develop the methodology of documenting hate crimes and hate speech. They commissioned the methodology to be developed by the academy, and I made a note. 2025 is pending, is going to be completed by the end of the year. That's exactly what we wanted to see and to show, because that's the document to be guided by to meet our commitments, that's the state of Ukraine, under Section 23 in our negotiations with the European Commission. Each of the recommendations is part of this section. And let me thank Council of Europe for organizing this event. We invited their experts, EU experts, to take a look at our issues for us to facilitate this stage of consultations with the EU. So take this document as the document to honor our obligations on the way to accession to the EU. And your approach, again, I am appealing to you, saying, we don't want to do this, we are not going to do this. And one of the recommendations that we developed is that until the person is issued the passport, to just give some kind of a document to prove that that's the person that is a citizen of Ukraine. I heard this idea from the representative of the National Police in Transcarpathian when he was saying, the person committed a crime, we apprehend the person, we don't understand who the person is. And he said, could you develop some kind of a document so that there is a name of the person, a date of birth, for us to be able to identify this person? It's not to receive social assistance, that's the next step, but it's just to identify the person, because you know how it might end if you cannot identify the person is to be let go. With all my respect to everybody, but that's what it is. So we heard this idea, we took note of this, and we included this proposal in this document. So you can always find 100 or even more explanations why you don't want to, cannot do something. But the idea of today's event was to hear how you can do that and your desire to do that, because all you have here is not my whim, but that's obligations of Ukraine as the country candidate to join the EU, and whether we are moving ahead along this track together or not. And the results of today's discussion will be noted and communicated to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, because he is the person that is in charge of the European path of Ukraine, for him to understand what authorities are doing that and what are blocking this process, so that when talking with the representatives of the European Commission, we wouldn't say that it is a political issue. No, we have our homework to do, and thus we would not leave any arguments for our enemies to manipulate who is. They have a huge desire for us not to enter the EU. So today's discussion, as I was saying, will result in an official document to be communicated to the Parliament and Prime Minister. And I'm grateful for the presence of the Parliamentary Committee for Human Rights at this meeting. Thank you for being here, and you see everything with your own eyes. Thanks a lot to all of you, dear colleagues. Apologies, but I am going to have a meeting with the European Ombudsman. She's recently elected, and there we are going to discuss the main issue, the protection of the rights of national minorities and indigenous people in Ukraine. Thank you.
Шановні колеги, ми
Dear
продовжуємо
colleagues,
далі.
we continue
Ще раз також хотів би подякувати всім
our
спікерам першого блоку
discussions. Let me thank all the speakers
рекомендацій органам державної
that commented on implementation of the recommendations. Let's move over, and the next session, that's implementation of the recommendations by oblast military administrations. And since we are behind the schedule, let me just give the floor to our online participants. The first to speak is Mr. Roman Hraba, Deputy Head of Chernihiv Regional Military Administration. Roman, the floor is yours. Good morning, dear participants. Good morning. Alexander, Chernihiv Oblast is one of the most diverse nationality-wise oblasts. There are almost 40 representatives of different nationalities, Ukrainian, Azeri, Germans, and others. We have around 30 civil society organizations, and 67 of them, that's
польські організації, 7% це молдавські та єврейські, і 3% відповідно
10 that's Moldova, Armenian, 7 that's Armenian and German ones. The strategy of the development of oblasts until 2027 states as the priority preservation of cultural diversity and integration with the European cultural space. Within the framework of this strategy, we implement practical steps that support 179 organizations that's for the development of libraries, with stocking them with books in the languages of national minorities, that's cultural events, contests, and music festivals, and orchestras participation in international festivals. We have book of winner contests with Poland, Romania, and Hungary participating. We have Polish, Romanian, German, and Hebrew houses, all national minorities that live in our oblast. Unanimously condemned Russian aggression against Ukraine and actively support national sovereignty over Ukraine. They actively involved in volunteer movement, and representatives of national minority organizations participate in this movement. In our oblast, we have 72 schools out of 636 of secondary schools where the tuition is conducted in Romanian. We also want to organize the network of lyceums where teaching is going to be in Romanian. 2 of them would be in Romanian, and 9, or rather 11, will have Romanian and Ukrainian.
In general, Chernihiv region has completely fulfilled all the recommendations of the Ombudsman. In particular, at our culture department, we now have a special unit working on the issues of national minorities and religious issues, where we now have 4 persons, staff, completely no vacations. We also have councils of the national minorities under the regional administration and the council of directors under the Department of Education and Science of Ukraine. The national communities have been engaged in the decision-making made on the level of the regional administration. We also support youth exchange. We have Olympic Games with representatives of the national communities. Therefore, as regards the rights of the national communities in the territory of our oblast, they are completely fulfilled, and we keep monitoring the situation on a permanent basis. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Hraba. It's true that Chernihiv Oblast has become the first one where the ombudswoman of Romania came, where she had a study visit to understand how the rights of the Romanian national minority are implemented in Ukraine, and the performance was quite highly assessed. Thank you. I'd like to give the floor now to Yaroslava Riznikova, Deputy Head of Department of Culture, Nationalities and Religions, Odessa Regional Military Administration. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak on the subject that is not only relevant but critically important for polyethnic regions such as Odessa region, for the country in general. In 2022 and 23, it became clear how serious transformations are happening in all areas of the life of the country and in Odessa region, and how what they have been caused by the full-scale invasions. During 2023, we analyzed the tendencies related to demography, migration processes, labor market, the social infrastructure, and social and cultural areas in the Odessa region. We saw that even before the full-scale invasion, the population of the region kept going down by about 10,000 persons every year. First of all, thanks to the negative birth rate, despite of positive migration figures, we keep talking about inflow of IDPs to Odessa region, and we had 245,000 registered IDPs in the Odessa region. We see a certain trend where the number of the members of national communities keeps going down as regards the Roma community, because the heads of the territorial communities are telling us that their number keeps decreasing because of internal and external migration. After the full-scale invasion, we've seen the change in the flows of IDPs. Mostly these are people coming from Mykolaiv and Kherson regions, and that means that the number of Bulgarians and Crimean Tatars keeps increasing, people staying in Odessa region. And we see that, for example, as regards the number of members of the national associations of those cultural national minorities. The ethnic political situation is very important for us in context of our relations with Romania, Moldova, and Poland, which can affect the logistical corridors, and we're using them to have better relations, representatives of the national communities of those titular nations. Sociological surveys and the facts of the military heroic deeds, such as Mr. Otziklevich, who was born in our region, or other persons, have confirmed that the national minorities completely support the European and Euro-Atlantic integration directions and lines of Ukraine. All this data has laid down the basis for the work we started in 2023 to draft a new strategy for development of Odessa region. The final project was presented in March of 2025, and after it is adopted, it will become a guideline for the local authorities. What is important for us is that it has a separate chapter on intercultural integration, development of human capitals, protection of cultural heritage, formation of identity. In the third chapter, human capital, we are talking about support of the material and non-material heritage and how to fight Russian propaganda to ensure inclusiveness in social and cultural processes, and increasing, which is important for every region, intercultural competence of the central and local authorities. It's especially important for us that the strategy takes into account the ethnic peculiarities of some micro districts, because the situation we have in Belgrade and Bodiysk is very different, not only because of the ethnic composition, but because of local challenges that those communities have to face. What was done during the period of 2023 and 24? The situation we had created some new challenges for the regional authorities and the communities by forcing them to almost completely stop the development program and use the anti-crisis management regime. Well, we didn't stop the work of 4 municipal centers of national cultures, the first of which was founded back in 1996 in the places of compact settlement of national communities. We fund them via the program called the Culture of Odessa region that has been extended till 27. To support the centers, the regional budget, for example, in 2024 allocated more than 9 million hryvnias We continued working with the Council of the Representatives of National Minorities who work in all different districts of Odessa region. For example, Krasno-Silska territorial community is very active in that. We keep cooperating with the NGOs, and especially we pay attention to supporting those civic initiatives that are implemented with active participation of the national communities within the context of preserving cultural heritage, or as regards humanitarian assistance to manage proper dialogue. Among such NGOs, we have Crimean Tatars of Odessa region who even initiated the project called the drone of a weekend drone that Polish, Georgian, Armenian, and Greek communities and so on, many others who are supporting the soldiers, the army, and those people who require their support. We should also mention their very active information work. And a very good example of this international advocacy for Ukraine is the work of the chairman of the Association of Jews, the prisoners of German concentration camps, Roman Schwarz. He has worked at the Bundestag and he is often interviewed, and he forms this very powerful message about Ukraine as independent democracy. Also represented Pavlo Kozlenko, another representative of a Jewish community, has set up a museum of Yaroslava. Please, yes, sir, right. Couple of minutes. I'm still using my 5 minutes, I believe. As a matter of fact, we are working with the young people, as the parliamentary commissioner has recommended to us. Interesting experience was participation of ethnic youth teams in the Unishift competition, and that will continue this year as well. We are not stopping our work on the movable national heritage. 11 of them are in the national list, and that means more possibilities for tourism and for development of the communities, especially in the areas of compact settlement. We're doing huge work in terms of culture, memorial events, and what is important this year, together with the National Service for Ethnic Policies, we plan to have a forum of national minorities, national communities of the south of Ukraine, and a festival called the Chernomor Black Sea Steppe. We have a well-established practice of cooperation with the associations. We have a unit for ethnic minorities and religions where we have quite competent professionals working there. We understand we have to support the NGOs. We're doing that with pleasure. And
Мабуть, у пані Ярослава
I'm
пропав.
afraid that Yaroslava has lost her connection.
Колеги
Colleagues,
по техніці. Підкажіть, будь ласка, по Zoom.
tell us, please, in terms of Zoom. All right, she's no longer with us.
Добре, тоді
Fine.
Тоді поки що переходимо далі.
So let's proceed. I want to thank Yaroslava for telling us about the work in Odessa region. I can tell you that our Odessa office works very closely with the local authorities in terms of the rights of the national minorities communities of Ukraine. Odessa is one of the few regions where our special report was presented. In Odessa and in Suma we did that as regards the rights of the national minorities and communities of Ukraine. Then we proceed to the next speaker, Alexander Lya, Deputy Director, Head of the Unit of National Groups and Religions of Transcarpathia Military Administration. Mr. Lach, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. My greetings to all the participants. I understand that we're slightly behind schedule. I will try to be as laconic as possible, just to say several words about the recommendations. Well, I don't have to tell you about Transcarpathia, about the unique multi-ethnic composition of it. You all know that according to the census of 2001, we had about 100 nationalities. We have unique Hungarian community, quite large Roma community, which at the moment perhaps is the largest one in Ukraine. I have to note that, speaking about the specific recommendations made by the Ombudsman and the strategic and operative objectives for the development of the Transcarpathia region, there is a special objective as harmonious development of national minorities and providing them access to the formation of regional policies and active support of ethnic associations to preserve their ethnic heritage. As regards funding this work, we're doing that within two regional programs, the program of regional budget for the overall amount in 2024, that was 1.7 million hryvnias were allocated. That's not so much, not as much as in Odessa, but we understand that given the war, this helps them a lot. As to increasing the number of civil servants, well, basically we are in quite a good situation in that respect because we have a whole department of nationalities and religions, where we have a separate unit there, and together with me, we have 4 vacancies. All of them are filled. We have 4 staff of 4 persons, and we work actively with all the minorities. The unit and the department in general systematically supports a dialogue with the representatives of the minorities. We work within our working groups, meetings. We provide active consultations on the implementation of the legislation. We support, we have constant support with the NGOs. We have more than 70 of them. I believe that as regards the human potential is quite good here. At the same time, I would like to support the idea that we should see the regional offices at the State Service for Ethnic Policies, at least in some regions like ours. Special some words about our cooperation with the Hungarian and Romanian communities. In 2023-24, we had permanent consultations even on the highest levels with the Hungarian, Romanian, and in particular President Zelensky met the Hungarian community. We have permanent consultations with the Vice Prime Minister and European integration. The Hungarian Forum was conducted here in December of last year, and the deputy head of administration of the office of the president of Ukraine, Viktor Mikita, had a meeting with representatives of Hungarian community on the 7th of April this year. We also actively work with the Roma community. We have an inter-ethnic working group to perform the Roma strategy adopted 2023. The head of it is one of the deputy heads of the regional military administration, and a representative of the Roma minorities, one of the deputies, because we are also working under the motto, nothing for the Roma without the Roma. All our work in terms of the rights and interests of the Roma community and others is only happening with active participation of the Roma minorities. Now, as regards recommendation to set up the national minority centers, we've had it since 1999. It has regional funding, and it makes it possible to have statutory activities for more than 20 NGOs and associations. They cannot have their work, perform their work in other places or facilities. As regards information support, and the representative of Well, it has already been, a lot has been said about that. I won't repeat it. As regards the Roma minority, we also have a regional plan of activities for 24 and 25, covering social security, countering discrimination, better access to healthcare, providing documents, developing infrastructure, the Roma settlements, and support to development of identity. I'd like to thank the regional representative of the Ombudsman, Mr. Andrei Kluchkov, who works with us very actively, especially as regards the Roma, and we feel the support of the regional office in all of our work and all the initiatives. In general, the interethnic relations are quite stable in our region. The national minorities show that they all have a consolidated position as regards countering the Russian aggression. The recent example, we saw it very clearly at the Hungarian Forum in December of 2024, but back in December 2023, representatives of the Hungarian minority wrote a letter to Charles Michel and Viktor Orban, where they called upon them to support the beginning of the negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the EU, and they stressed that the new law of Ukraine reflects their interests completely. The Transcarpathian military administration will continue working to implement the recommendations of the parliamentary commissioner and to support the inter-ethnic unity, regardless of many attempts of our enemy as part of his hybrid warfare to distort that inter-ethnic unity. This will not happen, and our communities of the region are completely supporting us. Thank you very much. I understand we have very little time left. Thank you, Mr. Lach.
Дійсно, робота в Закарпатській області.
It's true that the work of Transcarpathia region, the Ombudsman's office together with the partners does a lot of that, in particular the project to provide documents to the Roma community that was started by the Ombudsman together with the Council of Europe and other international organizations, UNHCR, Chiriklinika, and other government authorities is very important. There are many good developments, and we really want to thank you for your cooperation and your support, the military administration. Now we proceed, and I would like to give the floor to the chairman of the Council of National Communities of Ukraine, Shodor Vanisyan. We would like to hear from you, to hear the voice of the national minorities and communities as regards the state of the implementation of the recommendation of the Ombudsman.
Good morning, dear friends. Thanks a lot for the honor of being able to speak before you. The enforcement of national minorities, communities, and indigenous people have quite a special relevance with the beginning of the aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine on the temporarily occupied territories. We see repressions, language repressions, violation of religious, cultural rights. That's about Crimean Tatars, Greeks, Roma, and other ethnic groups. Despite the war, Ukraine continues implementation of international commitments in protection of human rights, and the law on national minorities, communities of Ukraine that came into force in 2023 is one of these steps. That's the result of the joint work of the state authorities, experts, and representatives of national minorities communities. Special report of the Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights on the observance of the rights of national minorities communities and indigenous people in the context of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine is the first document of this nature. It has 75 recommendations for state authorities. At the same time, that's the document that encourages the UN and OSCE to undertake measures to protect and enforce human rights in Ukraine. On behalf of all national minorities communities, let me thank the Parliament Commissioner for the Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, for everything that he's doing for national minorities. He does possible and impossible to ensure their rights. So we see that state authorities, civil society organizations are engaged in this, and you see how high the issue of national minorities is on the agenda. And let me also thank the Council of Europe office and all other institutions and organizations that help and support us in this. We, representatives of national communities, minorities and indigenous people, we want to make sure that our voice is heard and taken into consideration when state policy is being shaped. We value highly our cooperation with international partners, with the Council of Europe in particular, that provide expert support to Ukraine to adapt national legislation to European standards. A few words about State Migration Service. We used to work together with Naumenko in the State Committee on Religious and National Minorities. We will be happy to have a separate roundtable with your institution. We've never had anything like that, but we are ready to have this kind of bilateral workshop with you, because there are lots of pending issues, and we can develop the agenda to discuss it with the State Migration Service. Everything I am saying here is the position of all national communities and minorities that stay together. Today, we stay united. We have the department, the Ombudsman Office, Council of Europe is working to help national minorities. State Service for Ethnic Affairs and Freedom of Conscience also helps national communities. And together we are a powerful force. And if we stay together, we'll prevail. Thank you. Thank you for your messages. Indeed, only together, only working together, we can implement the recommendations that were developed through joint efforts. We have the session that is called discussion. We are beyond the time frame, but we want to have Q&A comments. So please raise your hand to ask question or express comment, and stay brief, please. And make sure that you use microphone. Yes, please. And please introduce yourself, and if you ask a question, say whom the question is addressed. Thank you. Head of the Council of Turkmens, member of the Expert Council. The question is to State Migration Service. That's a very important question, especially at the time of war. We have a lot of compatriots that fight for Ukraine cannot enjoy their rights in Ukraine because they don't have Ukrainian citizenship. That's a very acute and painful issue that I'm raising before State Migration Service. Similar to Azerbaijan, we are trying to get State Migration Service engaged this for 3 years. As Mr. Vanessa was saying, we are ready to talk to you directly. So here's the suggestion to you. Can we have representative of state migration service in Ombudsman office, and this person would be in charge for state migration service, so that they would stay in touch, and so that state migration service will fulfill all the recommendations and duties. Another thing is the following: many foreigners that come to Ukraine have permanent citizenship, and they are missing there. So let's say some representatives from Azerbaijan have got missing, and I am going to come to you on Thursday representing the family of victims. Thank you, Short, for your suggestion, and we appreciate the efforts of Ombudsman to protect the rights of national minorities. As you know, in Ombudsman office, there is a dedicated department, that's the department on equality of religious and national rights. I am in charge of the department, and Alana is looking there too, and protection of the rights, the person to documenting and certificates. That's something that we are in charge of, and we are working with the State Migration Service in the case of alleged violation of these rights. As to establishing some dialogue between the State Migration Service and other authorities, we heard this issue raised several times, so it's up to the State Migration Service to respond to this. I am in charge of citizenship. Unfortunately, we didn't have any request from you as to citizenship or statelessness. If there is a request, we are always ready to discuss it.
Дякую, я, можливо, представлюся сам.
Пане Романе, Роман Бігниць, організація НІКА. Прошу вас.
Roman Vignetti, NICA organization. I work for NICA organization. We are working on refugee issues since 2017. We are working in Transcarpathian region to support the right of person to documenting, especially when it comes to the risk of statelessness. The recommendations that have been provided by Ombudsman were developed jointly with us, and they are not theoretical. So that's basically practical recommendations that we developed based on the results of our 8 years of practical work. We provided support to 1,700 persons, and many of them received their passports. So the pilot project that you referred to was the one where we participated as well. And let me thank for the cooperation we enjoyed on the grounds with you within the framework of this pilot project on documenting. But that's not a systemic solution that was there, and the government cannot do anything unless there are legislative amendments made. For instance, when working with Roma, I would like to say that these persons tend not to know the date of birth or the name that they were registered. So unless we have a document or procedure that would allow for these persons to collect information about themselves on their own, for instance, to search registers for that, or to get the identities supported by the Ministry of Justice, or go to school and get the document as required by a law with some pictures, or just collect the information about themselves. And unfortunately, international organizations cannot support lawyers all the time. They cannot support the offices where people would handle this issue. That's the problem of the government of Ukraine, of the state of Ukraine. And that's part of the European integration process that we have to undertake and resolve this issue. So given the security of the state, there are some issues that could be difficult to implement at this stage, but there are some things that can be done in cooperation of state authorities and state migration service. It has been resolved. The person that comes for the passport to be issued, we do not require original of birth certificate. We verify that as well. If the person states something with a mistake, we verify this information on our own. So that's our job. If the person cannot get the document with the picture, we undertake the procedure of establishing the ID. The ID should be confirmed by at least one person. We cannot issue passport just like that. If you have any other problems that you see in your work, please let us know. We remain open. What I would like to say is that unfortunately, practically speaking, it looks different. If the person comes anywhere without any documents, the procedure of issuing documents cannot be launched. So on paper, the procedure exists and it looks good, but practically speaking, from the experience of Roma people, we know that it doesn't work. They may not speak Ukrainian, they may not understand the issue that they face, and if they hear no orally, then they wouldn't come next time to get the document. When we launch the procedure of documenting, we have to understand where the person is located and who is this person. If the person doesn't know anything about herself, himself, then we get the application, and within the framework of this application, we figure out what personal data is available, and only then we accept the application for the passport. So if you have any problems, just let us know. I mean, let us, the central office, know, and then we'll try to address it. Thank you. Let me give the floor to the member of the Parliament of Ukraine, member of the Committee on Human Rights, the Occupation and Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine, National Minorities and Ethnic Relations, Mr. Yaremenko. Thank you. I appreciate your invitation and the possibility to listen to the discussion, listen to the representatives of civil society and national authorities. Very interesting, in-depth discussion 2 weeks ago at the meeting of the committee. We listened to the presentation that was the report on human rights in Ukraine. We had a complementary assessment expressed there. Today, when listening to this discussion and having read the report, I can repeat the high assessment that we heard then. It was really comprehensive and detailed analysis of this situation. I like the scope of the issues raised, and the discussion shows that the conclusions are relevant. They can be implemented by respective authorities. Recommendations can be implemented, and they are well received by large public since they reflect the real needs of national minorities and other groups of people. Let me thank everybody who spoke today for your professionalism, and I really liked the comments of oblast administrations. It's great when you have this openness to communicate with people, representatives of national minorities on the ground. Let me thank State Migration Service for your participation. I have a very good experience of cooperating with them on servicemen of Belarus citizens. I talked to the head of the State Migration Service, and I know that if it is a specific issue, you that professional response. But dear colleague from the State Migration Service, you did your best to express the position of State Migration Service at this meeting. But my conclusion is that unfortunately it's not enough. We cannot agree with everything that you said at this meeting. I would call your approach, you will resolve all the issues on their own, just come to us. It's not going to work. I think that on the basis of today's discussion, I'll talk to Mr. Dolubinets additionally, and I hope that will help him to make sure that all the recommendations are implemented. I think the committee could talk to the Prime Minister and the respective executive authorities to ensure that recommendations are implemented. Mr. Dolubinets expressed concern that there is no responsibility for failure to implement the recommendations, but we have a responsibility for failure not to implement recommendations of the members of the parliament. And so my request to Migration Service, just friendly request, maybe the head of the State Migration Service should come up with the initiative to have a meeting with Mr. Dolubinets to talk through all the issues they are facing. I appreciate the efforts of Mr. Dolubinets and his team for the focus on the significance of the national minority issues, given our accession to the EU and given the war that we are fighting against a cruel enemy. Our unity inside the country depends on the implementation of these recommendations as well. And I think that irrespective of the date of our EU accession, since that we are discussing today as requirements of the EU, so as a very good ground to reform this area in Ukraine, that's in our interest and for the benefit, we have to implement these recommendations irrespective whether we are an EU member state or not, since that's in our interest and that's something that reflects our needs. Thanks a lot for this discussion. It was very informative for me personally, and it was really enjoyable to be with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yaramenko, for your speech and for all the initiatives that our leading parliamentary committee has, for your participation of the working group and for your high praise to the work of the Ombudsman and our special report. We had some questions from the audience. Hayam, please. Hayam Kaidatoglu, head of the United Congress of the Azerbaijani of Ukraine. I have a question to the Migration Service. After the beginning of the war, some 80% of the citizens of Azerbaijan, for different reasons, students, volunteers, business people, have been turned down. They are not allowed to come to Ukraine, although we send invitations to them from the companies that are ready to meet them. You know, in Ukraine is now short of construction workers and even of drivers in various areas. They are not allowed to come to Ukraine. The same is true for the citizens of Turkey. And there have been situations where about 80%, for example, the Azerbaijanis would fly to Chisinau, Moldova, and then they take cars to come to the border, but the Moldovans would not allow them to come in. They would be sent back from Chisinau, and there would be cases where 80% of the flights would be sent back. So these are hot problems. Ukraine needs people, specialists in different areas. Please, what can be done about that? Yet another issue. Can one devise a mechanism? For different mechanism in Ukraine, there are very many, well, let's say the truth, there are very many people who have no documents, practically no documents. How can they, what can be done for them? They're ready to pay fines, not even 5,000, 15 or 20,000. They work in different areas. Ukraine needs those people. What mechanism can be devised to legalize it? We have a legal department who would be ready to help you to gather their documents so that they would have proper legal grounds to stay in Ukraine. Thank you.
На сьогодні ви підняли питання щодо
You've brought up the issue of, for example, of
України.
letting foreign citizens to the territory of Ukraine. Unfortunately, I cannot answer that because I'm not the leading expert as regards work with foreigners. I can give you contact details of our people responsible for that. As regards your second question, can you clarify, please? Are we talking about foreign nationals who do not have documents? Yes, this is primarily about the nationals of Azerbaijan who have come to Ukraine. They didn't have the time to get their documents. They are staying here. Well, if a foreign national has lost one's national passport, for example, they would have to come to their embassies. No, they have passports of Azerbaijan, but they don't have the temporary certificate to make their stay legitimate. It's also quite, we have to look at every case, why they cannot get those papers, whether, well, as soon as they are apprehended, a fine would be imposed and they would be deported. Well, it's not here that we should discuss it. I will give you contact details. Two more questions. Ms. Hunadaria. Thank you. I will start with the words of gratitude to Mr. Lubinets for having gathered us all here together with our national communities, and that we're discussing issues about the work that has been done and what else should be done. What concerns me, I represent the Georgian diaspora in Ukraine. Today, for the fourth year now, 6,000 Georgians participate in the war in Ukraine. Well, today there are fewer of them. Some of them have seen their contracts expire. Some of them cannot go back home for the reason because there they are considered to be terrorists. Many have problems. After the end of their contracts, they cannot stay in Ukraine more than 90 days. Maria, I understand you because all these questions are directed at you. We have discussed it, and today we are working on how to find a solution, how to help those people together with the Ombudsman's office. However, I would like to see a better treatment so that together with you, we, for example, can make those people legal, the ones who want to stay in Ukraine. The ones who do not want to, they will, of course, eventually go back home. But as far as I know, those people who applied to me, I would say it's about 70% of them want to stay in Ukraine. Thank you. Well, I can tell you about my area. People who serve in the army in the territory of Ukraine, or the National Guard, or the Committee for Special Communication, they can acquire citizenship of Ukraine, and there are some benefits for them. What we get from them is the declaration of rejection of their citizenship, original citizenship. They do not have to contact their state to do that, but as regards the legality of their stay, after the end of the contract, well, unfortunately, I cannot answer that. But I can give you the contact details of a leading expert in our department who can tell you about whether this issue is regulated by the law. Let me add a little bit to this question. So the thing is, look, the situation is people have come from Georgia, from Russia, who are fighting with Ukraine, with against the Russian Putlerites, the fascists, and then we abandoned them. I know such guys, Azerbaijanis, Georgian, who have been wounded, crippled, without a leg, and what they should do. What is the specific mechanism that can be proposed to them so that those people who are fighting for Ukraine, they cannot go back to Russia, they cannot go back to Georgia, because we understand that Georgia is pro-Russian today, that controls everything there, and that is destroying the pro-Ukrainian opposition. So these people have come to fight for us, and we're not giving them anything. We're telling them, no, you cannot stay here, you leave. It's a problem. It's a problem that Mr. Lubinets has started speaking. I was emotional in my speech, but this is where a collegiate solution has to be found. It's a serious problem. People come, die, and fight for Ukraine, and we tell them, unfortunately, we do not want how to help you. We have no mechanisms. We are not getting an answer about how we, as the Ukrainian society, can find a solution to this problem. So let's do it the way we've suggested. Let's set up some kind of a commission to have a round table. We can give you some professional lawyers. So we can immediately develop a mechanism. We have a member of the parliament who is ready to solve it. That's a serious problem. And we want people to keep coming here, keep coming foreigners, because we have limited human resources. It's a big problem. It's just that, not to formally do our work, but if we want to change the country, we have to take up the initiative. We are ready. Is the migration service ready to take the initiative and to set up some kind of a group so we can work on those draft laws as quickly as possible? Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Chairman of the Federation of Greek Communities in Ukraine. The compact settlements of Greeks used to be in Donetsk, in the Azov region, and I'd like to put several questions that we keep getting from our community, from those people who used to live in those territories. And since 2022, we've all been working on evacuation to a certain extent, and sometimes the results are good, and sometimes their results are not too good. So my question is the following. It's either to the Ministry of Interior or to other ministries whose powers now include evacuation processes, including the regional military administrations. We need to start thinking about how to create a special evacuation service that will deal with those processes. At the moment, the evacuation is dealt with by the National Police and the State Service of Emergencies, but it is mostly the volunteers who come to the areas of hostilities, and these are the ones who work on evacuation problems. In the recent month, 3 volunteers died who worked with evacuation procedures. We would like to start discussing it already and turn to the Ministry of Interior or to the Cabinet of Ministers, suggesting to set up, either under the regional military administrations, to create an evacuation service that will have all the proper status, proper security possibilities, or under the Ministry of Interior or under the National Police. That there should be such a service, including the volunteers who come to the front line. Another question related to the first one, evacuation of men who are in the category who are to be drafted, who are in the category of people who can be drafted. Some men do not want to leave because as soon as they come to the territory controlled by the Ukrainian government, the recruiters are waiting for them, and a man cannot even have the time to put one's family into a dormitory or to find some kind of a safe place for his family. Immediately that man would be recruited or drafted into the army. So not all men agree, and they say it's better for us to stay here lest I be mobilized and sent to the army. So the question is to the Ministry of Defense. The request is to develop such a mechanism to suspend at least, or to delay at least by 6 months, the possibility for men who have left the frontline areas, so that they could have a possibility to to take care of one's family, and once the family is in a safe situation, then one can be drafted into the army. And the third question to the Ministry of Social Policies. We have faced a situation where people, the internally displaced persons, they would live in the areas under Ukrainian government control, but they face a situation when a person dies. Unfortunately, sometimes there is no authority that would organize the burial, the funeral, and that would pay for it, because not always the local authorities where IDPs of the communities where IDPs are staying, it's not always that they can finance the burial of those people. So there should be a national program, and the local authorities, they should have such a line in their budget saying that if an IDP dies in a certain territory, there should be a possibility for the government to allocate some funds to bury such people. These are the three questions to different ministries that are important for us. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Unfortunately, not everyone is here, but as regards evacuation, let me tell you that the parliamentary commissioner and his secretariat are also helping people to be evacuated from the temporarily occupied territories. Dear colleagues, we will be drawing the line. We will proceed now to the final words. Mr. Yaremenko, if you're still with us. Yes, I can hear you well. If you want to say a couple of words. Well, everything has been said, right? But I have spoken as well. So what I wanted to say, I have already said it. So thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm giving the floor to Zemfira Kondor, manager of the Council of Europe project, that has helped us today very much with organizing this event and with creating this special report, and with your permanent support. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. Dear colleagues, dear participants of this meeting, all those who have waited till the end, who have been listening to us, till those final words, all those present here and online, thank you for this event today. The special report of the Parliamentary Commissioner of Human Rights on the rights of the national minorities, it's a long, long name. I won't read all of it. That report is really very important for Ukraine, because that was the first, and as far as I remember, the only one for now, report that speaks about the situation with the rights of the national minorities or communities during the armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine. This is a document that documents violations of the rights of national communities in the temporarily occupied territories. It's a document that contains very important recommendations. And those recommendations, in fact, are very helpful as Ukraine keeps moving along the process of legislative screening to accelerate the process of joining the European Union, because very many of those recommendations that can be found in this report are already reflected in the roadmap for Chapter 23, and as regards the activities about the national minorities and communities that are part and parcel of this roadmap. So what has already been done only is helping Ukraine in this difficult process and accelerates it. I also want to say that we are very grateful for this joint work that we're doing together with the Ombudsman's Office and the Department of Equal Rights and Freedoms of the National Minorities, because it's a huge scale of work, and the way how we cooperate closely with you has turned us into one team, and I hope that this will continue in the same way. Colleagues, I hope that the new recommendations that we have heard about today will also be reflected in our future work, will be taken on board, and together we will be able to keep implementing the recommendations that have not yet been implemented. Our today's meeting, I saw here how important it is to get together, to discuss some problems. Sometimes it is not easy. Sometimes these are problems that require quite huge efforts and consolidation for our work. But when we are together, we can find certain solutions for the problems that we face. I really want to thank you. I want to thank the Department of Equal Rights and Freedoms. I want to thank Mr. Lubinets for having found time to be with us today and for paying so much attention to the issue of the rights of national minorities and communities. I really want to thank everyone who has been involved in the organization of this event. I want to thank our team of the Council of Europe office, all the technical support, the interpreters, all the speakers who have been with us online and offline. And as Mr. Lubinet said, then we will work in a very powerful way on these recommendations. We, as the project of the Council of Europe, we're ready to keep working together with you. And I also want to thank Mr. Avanesyan and the Council of National Communities for your powerful support, for this kind of a permanent backup that we have provided by the national minorities communities. Thank you. Thank you, Zemfira.
І, шановні колеги, колежанки, учасники, учасниці заходу, всі, хто доєднався
Dear
онлайн.
participants, dear colleagues, those who are here and those who are online, let me thank all and everybody of you for the engagement in this really interesting in-depth discussion. Let me thank Council of Europe and Council of National Minorities of Ukraine. We have 75 recommendations. 45 of them are implemented. If I counted right, 2 more as implemented have been added, 18 have not been implemented. During this event, we identified the main issues and barriers on the way of the implementation to the recommendations and shaped the priorities that will serve as an impetus for further actions. Given all this, it's very important to have cooperation between state authorities and have it as a systemic one, and that would speed up implementation and progress on each of the recommendations. Special attention should be paid to inclusivity, thus engaging representatives of national minorities, communities, and indigenous people in decision-making in assessment of the efficiency and efficacy of the undertaken measures and shaping the policy. Without the voice of national minorities and indigenous people, we are not going to have real changes. Well, let me thank all participants and those present for the constructive dialogue, for your engagement, and I do hope that further steps will lead to 100% recommendations implemented. Thanks to all of you.
Наразі ми можемо перейти в сусідню залу
We
для
can
проведення обіду із
go to the adjoining room where we are going to have lunch.
Після обіду у нас ще буде